This volcanic island, which rose from the sea 3 million years ago, was once just a barren lump of rock lost in the Indian Ocean. Yet here, in this terribly remote spot, life miraculously gained a foothold, as it must have done before elsewhere in other lands. We are about to tell you the story of this miracle, the tale of an island where the conquistadors are plants and animals that have traveled an incredible distance, crossing deserts and mountains, braving storms, and traversing oceans to reach the coasts of this majestic rock. This is Réunion Island, the only place of its kind in the world, a mere infant on the scale of our planet's history and a very recent discovery for humanity. This giant spewing burning lava could have turned this island into a hell. However, the slopes of the volcano, with their mild tropical climate, offer a huge variety of settings where we can still watch the birth, life, and evolution of the world garden today. This oceanic island is very much a laboratory of the living world, a witness to the perpetual evolution of nature. Here, men and women are currently trying to answer a number of universal questions. How do plants and animals colonize hostile, inaccessible lands? Which ones adapt to survive? For this remote land in the middle of the ocean is a formidable biological model, a natural heritage that may well hold the key to understanding how ecosystems form, how animal and plant species coexist in a delicate equilibrium, and how they evolve. We are to the southeast of the coast of Africa, 800 kilometers from Madagascar. Here, in the heart of the Indian Ocean, are the Mascarene Islands of Rodrigues, Mauritius, and lastly, Réunion. Child of the union of fire and ocean, Réunion Island rose from the heart of our planet. Our story begins 4,000 meters down, with a volcanic hotspot, a precise point where the Earth's lifeblood bursts free with a deafening roar. When the pressure of magma grows too extreme under an oceanic plate, it forms a hotspot below the Earth's crest, which ultimately fissures. This hotspot is stationary. It does not follow the movements of the ocean floor. So, as the oceanic plate shifts, the burning magma pierces it in different places, producing a chain of volcanoes. More than 2 million years ago, this rocky island was a collection of cold, lifeless rivers of magma, similar to the ones we can see now. Like their Hawaiian cousins, these Réunion Island volcanoes are of the effusive type. The lava escaping from their craters forms rivers that can flow at up to 70 kilometers an hour. These gigantic eruptions produced most of the oceanic formations in the region, all the offspring of the same hotspot, from the most recent, such as Réunion Island or Mauritius, to the oldest, the Maldives and the Deccan traps in India. The oldest volcanoes have slipped to the north, moving away from the current hotspot, while the youngest, such as those on Réunion Island, are still close to the hotspot's eruption zone. The underwater formation of Réunion Island began 5 million years ago. After more than 2 million years of gestation, new virgin territory appeared. Like the rest of the island, Piton des Neiges was the product of a series of undersea basalt flows, which cooled and solidified, piling up on top of each other until they reached the surface and slowly rose towards the sky. As Piton des Neiges slipped gradually northwards, a fresh vent emitting molten basaltic rock appeared on its southeast flank. The new volcano, Piton de la Fournaise, emerged 500,000 years ago. It shifted east, sank into the sea, then collapsed several times. All Although Piton des Neiges has gradually become dormant, Piton de la Fournaise remains one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Meanwhile, an explosive phase accompanied by an emission of pumice and ash caused the magma chamber at Piton des Neiges to cave in. Large cirques formed at this point. Its eruptions occur every 18 months on average. They're extremely spectacular, but not very dangerous. Réunion Island is a remarkable phenomenon because it's a true island, never having been linked to a continent. The island is still growing, evolving as it erupts. Its contours are changing and its surface area is still increasing. Like two great books open to the history of the world, the two colossi describe their island's past and perhaps our planet's to those who are able to read them. Today, a new Garden of Eden has sprung from their ashes, a mosaic of ecosystems where a unique flora and fauna teem. All the stages in the development of an ecosystem can be read in successive lava flows from each eruption. To better grasp the complex phenomena involved in the colonization of virgin rocky ground by the plant kingdom, we have to go back to the point at which the lava cooled, that specific moment when life was finally able to gain a foothold. Dominique Strasberg, professor at the University of Réunion Island, is an expert on the colonization of lava flows. Accompanied by Claudine Apeng, he sees that pioneer plants are already at work after the chaos produced by the last eruption.
Là, on est sur une coulée qui a
Here we're on a flow
entre 2 et
that's
3
2
ans,
to
là,
3 years
récente.
old,
Elle est déjà
extremely
recouverte en
recent,
surface par
but its
une
surface is
colonie de
already
lichen.
covered by a
Donc
colony
ce
of
lichen en
lichen.
fait a deux modes de
This lichen
propagation
actually
à
has two
distance
methods
par
of
des
long
spores et
distance
surtout par des
propagation,
fragments. Il est capable d'émettre
spores,
des
but mainly
microcolonies qui
It
vont
is capable of
disperser très loin
releasing
par les courants
microcolonies
aériens
that can travel a very
et
long
donc
way in
retomber
air
sur des
currents,
surfaces, des
then
substrats
fall onto
neufs comme
surfaces.
une lave
New
refroidie.
substrates such as
Le
barley cooled
lichen,
lava.
c'est deux êtres
Lichen
vivants
is made up of two living
ensemble,
creatures
une
together, a symbiosis between
une
an
algue
alga
et un
and a
champignon.
fungus. The alga
L'algue,
harnesses light
par sa
energy through
photosynthèse, utilise
photosynthesis
l'énergie
and
lumineuse
supplies
pour
carbon
son
resources,
carbone, et le
while the
champignon
fungus breaks down the
dégrade le
basalt to
basalte
provide
qui apporte
minerals
des
and nutrients.
minéraux, des éléments nutritifs.
The appearance of these microscopic pioneers adapted to extreme climatic conditions will have far-reaching consequences for the spread of life. Can we imagine a tree growing on this fragile carpet of lichen one day? Soon moss follows, forming a cozy nest. The subsequent growth of different plants in this mossy cocoon enables more sophisticated cousins to flourish there. A process has begun. The great saga of life is being played out under the open sky before our eyes. The first bryophytes, mosses made up of short stems, will be able to thrive.
Les bryophytes, en fait, n'ont pas de racines.
In fact, bryophytes don't have roots or a vascular system, so they acquire all their nutrients and water through leaves. They form this first layer of organic matter that will support other plants when they arise successively.
In the ocean depths, volcanoes still rumble. Blocks of rock emerge from the womb, their incandescent fusion shattering the gray dimness of the seabed. The water boils and steams. chaos has sculpted a new terrain, allowing us to observe the emergence of life once more. Carried by ocean currents, fish rapidly populate this future aquatic garden. In just a few months, pioneer corals, the ingenious partnership of a tiny animal, the polyp, and an alga, will colonize this jagged volcanic relief. As brilliantly colored creatures and plants with their swaying fringes inhabit and brighten the seabed, life teems and multiplies. On the cool lava flows, after the lichens and mosses, the first ferns rapidly begin to grow. 300 million years ago, long before the emergence of Réunion Island, ferns were among the first plant species to colonize the Earth. These direct descendants of algae had to evolve to adapt to the open air, growing larger and developing stems, feeding through roots and capturing light energy with leaves. Dominique Strasberg takes us to a flow of lava that is recent, but a little older than the previous one. He lays out a grid on the ground to inventory the species on this site, where colonization is more advanced.
Oui, vas-y. Oui,
No, yes, go on that way.
Vas-y. Donc, faudra bien le tendre.
You've got to stretch it out completely.
Puis nous, on va le fixer avec des normes, c'est bon.
You just have to fix it with a bit of lava.
Le fixer avec un peu de lave. Là. Donc là, je rentre dans le cadran et je vais te donner en détail le nombre de plants pour chaque espèce. On va commencer par les herbacées.
So we mainly have this fern,
on a essentiellement cette fougère, la Nephrolepis abrupta,
which is the pioneer fern on all tropical zone lava
toutes les coulées de lave en zone tropicale.
Okay. 17.
Donc, au pied des
At the foot of the Nephrolepis, we added 2 indigenous Sinorchis orchids.
Dernière espèce importante, le bois de rempart. Là, on a fait l'angle de la parcelle.
Which forms the corner of the plot.
Absolument avoir ça.
Ferns appear a few decades after the lichen and moss. However, pioneer shrubs often grow at the same time, and their shadow gradually kills the ferns, which need direct light. They produce humus as they rot, preparing the ground for other species.
Donc en créole, on l'appelle le bois de rempart.
It's called the
Dès
bois
qu'il a
de
une
rempart
place
in
dans
Creole.
une fissure de la
Rampart
lave,
wood.
il peut atteindre, là
As
sur
soon
une
as
coulée
it
récente,
finds
déjà des
space in the
hauteurs
lava cracks,
conséquentes. Donc c'est
already in recent
original
flow
d'avoir un arbre
it can reach
qui est déjà
significant
présent
heights.
sur des
It's
laves
unusual to have a tree
très
already
récentes,
growing on
en même
very
temps que
recent
des
lava
plantes
flows,
pionnières,
along with
lichens et
pioneer
fougères.
plants.
Donc ce bois de rempart a
Mosses,
un
lichens,
rôle
and ferns.
très original sur ces coulées.
So
va servir de
Agoria
perchoir
salicifolia
pour
plays
les
a very
oiseaux
original
forestiers
role on
qui
these
doivent
flows,
traverser
since it
ces
acts as
coulées
a
de lave.
perch for forest
Donc,
birds
quand
that have to
l'oiseau
cross the
arrive
lava.
au sommet de ce
When the
perchoir,
bird reaches the
lorsqu'il va
top of the
déféquer ou
perch and
régurgiter,
defecates or
il va
regurgitates,
déposer au pied
it
de
drops dozens of
ces
forest
arbres
seeds at the
des
foot of the
dizaines de
tree.
graines issues de la
Little by
forêt.
little,
Et
several
petit à petit, on
plantlets
va
of
voir
forest
émerger et
trees will
germer
come
au
up at
pied
the
de l'arbre
foot of the Agoria
plusieurs
salicifolia.
plantules d'arbres forestiers au pied du bois de rempart.
It took 10,000 years to build this coral reef. In the transparent turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean, the fabulous display of undersea life continues. Today, the coral reef provides shelter and a habitat for a great number of fish. These elegant residents have evolved to find food in this particular environment. The crowd is all there. A strange myriad of speckled, striped, multicolored creatures moving through this magnificent setting. Peace and harmony seem to reign here. Over the millennia, sheltered from the Indian Ocean's violent currents, the undersea species have diversified considerably. A a striking explosion of colors and textures, sometimes smooth, downy or fringed, undulating gracefully. In this profusion of life, it's almost impossible to draw a line between plants and animals. Today, each organism has its place and function in this complex ecosystem. They are born, feed, breed, take shelter, and die here. On land, a new phase of colonization is already apparent. Nature only takes a few months to gain a hold on virgin lava. After 10 years, it's completely covered by moss and lichen. Then, after only 30 to 40 years, the great ferns move in.
La strate dominante,
the dominant stratum. Here are our two species of fern, Nephrolepis abrupta and Lycanopterus linearis.
Donc le recouvrement il est de 100%.
So coverage is 100%.
Donc on retrouve là les deux
Here
bois de
are the two
rempart,
Agoria
deux
salicifolia,
espèces
and then two species spread there by birds.
On a le change écorce là, celui qui est au-dessus de moi.
We have the Aphloia theiformis there, the one above me, and the Anteria borbonica, also spread by birds.
Disséminé par les oiseaux.
There is now a majority of great ferns, and the shrubs are well established. Of course, the first transient birds did not settle here until a significant forest ecosystem had appeared and developed. They carry away and disperse seeds stuck to their feathers or in the mud on their feet.
Là-dessous, c'est
under there, the darkness is almost total.
Là, une densité de fougères très élevée, c'est vraiment pour des plantes tolérantes à l'ombre. Voilà.
Dominique Strasberg measures the quantity of light present in the ecosystem.
Au-dessus, on a déjà des jeunes arbres qui étaient
Above,
présents
we already have young
stade,
trees that were present at the first stage and which are beginning to form a forest canopy. They'll take advantage of the humidity and nutrients. Then, when the forest canopy begins to form, these direct light heliophilous ferns will gradually die out.
Petit à petit disparaître.
The pioneer plants that allow the trees to grow will disappear, to be replaced by forest, but only after 2 or 3 centuries. So the island is a permanent observatory of colonization. One only has to examine each of the lava flows carefully to see how vegetation takes hold, forms a new layer, and evolves over the years. It takes about 100 years to go from a purely mineral environment to trees 7 or 8 meters high. And in barely 300 years, a forest has sprung up. But for certain plants that have arrived on the island, the journey is not yet over. They still have to spread, evolve, adapt, and differentiate themselves from their ancestors. When individuals are isolated from their parents and evolve to adapt to a specific environment, they create a new species, which is said to be endemic. So endemism is greater on islands than on continents. Here, 6 climatic regions have appeared, 30 or so ecosystems from the coastal lands to the high forests, where more than 2,000 species of plant and indigenous animal flourish. This is a new Eden, a mosaic of environments where flora and fauna that are not to be found anywhere else abound. Totally devoid of life originally, the diminutive Réunion Island boasts no less than 800 species of flower and 230 ferns today. So how did these species reach this remote island in the middle of the Indian Ocean? Well, when the island emerged just 3 million years ago, the world's fauna and flora, already highly diverse, came here by air or sea. These conquistadors arrived under their own steam, roughly 70% of them from Africa and Madagascar, 20% from India, and 10% from Australia. Although certain species cross the oceans by floating on the waves, eggs or animals hanging onto the severed branches of trees, for instance, most were carried to the island by winds. The Indian Ocean is regularly swept by cyclones, and these ultra-powerful meteorological phenomena, with winds gusting at over 300 kilometers an hour, could sweep up seas and carry them over long distances. In the beginning, there was a volcano nestling in the heart of the ocean, the cradle of all life, origin of its miracle. Alone in the middle of the sea, in time, the arid rock turned into a new Eden. Over 3 million years of evolution, the island became a paradise for every living creature there. Plants and animals came from distant lands, India, Africa, and Australia, to find a home on the slopes of the volcano. This unique ecosystem, this cloud forest wrapped in mist and mystery, this chlorophyllous pearl, is one of the last virgin forests in the world. The king that rules over it is Acacia heterophylla, an endemic tree of majestic bearing and many unusual characteristics. Thierry Paillet of the University of Réunion Island, an expert on the Belouve Virgin Forest, is attempting to penetrate the secrets carefully guarded by this extraordinary forest.
Dans ce type d'écosystème, la majorité des arbres qui poussent sont des tamarins, une espèce qui en fait a un système racinaire qui est superficiel et qui le rend en fait très fragile et très sensible aux forts vents cycloniques. Et le fait que le tamarin, une fois couché et partiellement déraciné, puisse donner de nouveau des branches, permet à l'espèce de se maintenir et de ne pas se décomposer pour être intégrée au sol, mais au contraire, constituer un nouveau support sur lequel va pouvoir se développer un sol.
Acacia heterophylla, a tree endemic to Réunion Island, is a complex ecosystem in itself.
Tu prends longueur-largeur de la plus grande feuille, c'est ça? On peut avoir cet enchevêtrement de troncs et de branches sur plusieurs mètres de hauteur, 2 voire 3 mètres dans certaines zones, ce qui fait qu'on a des sols à plusieurs niveaux de la forêt. Donc, un fait qui est assez original dans cette forêt, c'est qu'on retrouve aussi des sols sur les branches et les troncs horizontaux.
In the forest of Belouve, about 150 plant species have been listed. Acacia heterophylla has adapted to mid-level altitudes and become the dominant tree in this environment. Its seeds never germinate in the shade of the forest canopy. Only cyclones can bring it down, because its shallow roots make it vulnerable to high winds. When one falls, the sun's warmth reaches the ground through the gap in the canopy, and its seeds there begin to germinate. When the new tree matures, it would prevent most plant species from growing beneath it. But even cyclones do not necessarily kill Acacia heterophylla. It often topples without dying. In fact, it's very rare to find a large specimen standing straight and upright. The ability of its root system to grow again from a branch allows it to continue growing after it falls, even to a size of 20 to 25 meters. The tree is native to Australia but has evolved away from its ancestors to adapt to the particular hostile conditions here and reign over this forest. Native species are living organisms that have settled naturally in a zone. Some will have changed so much that they have become endemic species, located in that precise area and nowhere else. Exotic species, though, are species brought by human settlers from distant countries. Animal and plant species that have survived the voyage have been able to gain a foothold in the heart of this virgin island. Like populations of colonists, all these immigrant species have tried to occupy their own space, new territory where they can flourish and reproduce. Each of them has had to come a long way, face the elements, and develop specific traits different to those of the original conquering species. This has made them into what we commonly call endemic species. They form a natural heritage and a biological identity specific to the island, which must be preserved for future generations. This endemic Réunion Island ornate day gecko is a perfect example of this specificity. It only survives on an area of a few hundred square meters on the coast. Today, Réunion Island has 700 native species. The incredible variety of its environments, from coastal land to savanna and low-elevation forests to mountain vegetation, has enabled them to survive. One such species, the mascarene swiftlet, a bird similar to the swift, has found dark caves to breed in here, and a habitat suited to its way of life. It has evolved and is only found in the archipelago today. The biological population of the island could well have served as a scientific basis for Charles Darwin to support his theory on the evolution of species. The phenomenon of speciation, the development of new original species from a population, is clearly seen on Réunion Island. This is the case of a specific tree named Agoria salicifolia, which is to be found on the coast, at mid-level altitudes, and up on the island's heights. 3 locations give a picture of its amazing ability to evolve.
Au sein de ce groupe d'espèces, on montre la formidable capacité des plantes à s'adapter à des milieux et des environnements différents. Donc en fait, toutes ces espèces sont originaires de Madagascar, et lors d'un cyclone, il y a eu une quantité phénoménale de graines qui ont traversé la barrière océanique pour arriver dans divers endroits à la Réunion. Donc à partir d'un même pool génétique de départ, selon la pression écologique du milieu, on va avoir une adaptation de chaque plante à son environnement, ce qui va donner des espèces différentes. Les graines qui sont arrivées à basse altitude ont donné naissance à une espèce qui est le bois de rempart de la forêt de Marlongue, qui constitue un arbre d'environ 20 mètres de haut. Alors qu'à cette altitude moyenne, là on est en forêt de montagne, on a des individus qui sont beaucoup plus chétifs. Et en très haute montagne, c'est-à-dire dans la région du volcan, on a une troisième espèce qui s'est développée dans des conditions écologiques différentes des 2 précédentes et a donné encore une nouvelle forme avec un port complètement différent, à savoir que les individus ne dépassent pas 50 cm de hauteur.
So the size of a plant species is observed to have changed in response to external conditions. Some of these plants are now 40 times the size of their cousins established in a hostile environment. This remarkable island offers so many possibilities for wildlife that a seabird unique in the world decided to take refuge there above the clouds. On Réunion Island, Barrow's petrel nests at a very high altitude along the cliffs of Piton des Neiges. Mathieu Lecor of the Réunion Island Ornithological Research Society, an expert on the species, goes to look for the birds at nesting time, the only period when it's possible to observe them.
Voilà. Donc la dernière fois, on est descendu par là.
The last
Donc
time
là,
we went down that way.
Par là.
So we'll set up
Et
there,
puis on va
then go
descendre,
down
et
and
puis
try and find them,
retrouver, quoi.
if they're still
Ils sont
there.
encore là. Le pétrel de Barrow, c'est là qu'il niche très haut en montagne. C'est un des oiseaux marins qui niche les plus hauts dans le monde. Et il niche là sans doute peut-être pour des raisons climatiques et puis aussi pour éviter les prédateurs. Donc là, on va descendre dans le rempart et puis on va prospecter les lyres qu'il y a là à la recherche des terriers.
Barrow's petrel colonies settle on these vegetation-covered plateaus at a height of between 2,500 and 2,800 meters.
Donc là, on cherche
Here
des
we're
vires,
searching for
des endroits où les
In other
pétrels
words,
peuvent
places where the
creuser leurs
petrels can
terriers.
dig their burrows.
Où, donc il faut qu'il y ait pas mal d'humus, il
There has
faut
to
qu'il
be
y ait
quite
des
a lot
petits
of
replats.
humus. There have to be
Donc
little
souvent, c'est
shelves.
des endroits où il y a des
So there
branches
are
ou des
often places
tamarins
where
qui
there's
poussent.
brush
Voilà,
or
par exemple, là,
acacia
ça commence à être pas
etherophila
mal.
growing. For instance,
Peut-être qu'il
things
y
are
a de
starting to
l'humus
look good here.
suffisamment pour un
There
pétrel.
may be enough humus
Et
for a
peut-être qu'il y a un
petrel. There may be a petrel. Let's go
On
and
va aller
look.
voir. Ah oui, il y en a un. Allez, viens là.
A little petrel.
Et puis, petit pétrel. Un petit peu de duvet.
A bit of down on its neck.
Le pétrel de Barrow
Barrow's petrel
donc,
is
est
endemic to
endémique de la
Réunion
Réunion.
Island.
Les
The only
seuls
known
sites de
breeding sites
reproduction
in the
connus
world
dans le
are on
monde
Piton
sont
des
au
Neiges
Piton
and
des Neiges et au
Grand-mère.
Grand-Bénard.
In fact,
En fait,
what
ce qui
makes
fait
the bird
l'endémisme,
endemic
c'est
is that
le
the
fait que
adults
les
always
adultes sont
return to their
fidèles à
breeding
leur site
site.
de reproduction.
Even if
Même
they have
s'ils
a
ont
great
une très
faculty
grande
for
capacité
dispersion
de
at sea,
dispersion en mer,
they always
ils
come back to
reviennent
nest in
nicher
the
toujours
same
au même
place,
endroit,
in the
dans le
same
même
burrow, in
terrier,
the
dans la
same
même
colony,
colonie, si
and if
possible,
possible
avec
with
le
the
même
same mate.
partenaire.
So that
Et donc
limits
ça,
the
ça
flow of
limite
genes
évidemment
and
les
results in
fusions.
endemism.
Donc ça va
There
entraîner
are
de
many
l'endémisme.
islands like
Il y
that
a
where
beaucoup
there's an
d'îles comme ça où
endemic
il y a
species
une
of
espèce de
petrel.
pétrel
What's
endémique.
special about Réunion
L'originalité de la
Island
Réunion,
is
c'est
that
qu'il y
there
a
are
deux
two
espèces de
endemic
pétrel endémique.
species.
Estimated at 4,000 pairs, the Barrow's petrel population breeds during the southern summer when it travels to its nesting areas on the peaks of the island. Barrow's petrel, Pterodroma barrowi, is a seabird that reached the island on its own. It was only discovered in 1963 and its nesting place is identified in 1995. Its biology makes it vulnerable. Since it only lays one egg annually per breeding pair, it has become an endangered species. Its long journeys over the waves of the Indian Ocean give it the potential to disperse seeds over very long distances. Seeds in its feathers can cover vast stretches of ocean to reach the island.
Les oiseaux marins ont dû
Seabirds must
contribuer
certainly
très
have contributed
fortement à
greatly
l'arrivée
to the
des premières
arrival of the
plantes
first
sur l'île de
plants
la
on
Réunion.
Réunion Island.
Une des caractéristiques, c'est leur très
One of
grande
their
mobilité, leur
characteristics is their very
capacité de
great
dispersion,
mobility,
de
their
déplacement.
capacity for
C'est beaucoup
dispersion and
d'espèces, en
travel.
fait, en se posant dans la végétation,
When many
il va y avoir
species
des petites
land in
graines qui vont
vegetation,
s'accrocher aux
little
plumes.
seeds stick to their
Et ces
feathers
petites
and
graines
hitch
vont
a ride, you
ensuite
could say,
profiter du voyage,
being
si je veux
carried
dire,
for
et vont être
hundreds or
transportées sur des
thousands of
centaines ou des milliers de
kilometers.
kilomètres. Et quand l'oiseau va se
When the
poser sur
bird
une autre
lands
île,
on
par
another
exemple
island,
les
a young
jeunes
bird looking
qui
for new
vont
breeding
prospecter
sites,
des
for
nouveaux
instance,
sites de
that
reproduction, et
island
bien, comme
will be
ça, il va y
colonised
avoir
by the coastal
colonisation
vegetation.
par de la végétation littorale.
Little by little, carried by winds, sea currents, bats, birds, cyclones, and storms, plants have successfully colonized the island and produced a phenomenon that is rare today, a unique tropical forest. In this forest, flowering plants have developed a peculiar survival strategy. They have decided to grow high up above the forest floor. In the virgin forest of Belouve, an astonishing terraced structure has emerged. Here, it is difficult to reach the floor. Different species are tangled up together and some do not actually touch the ground. Unlike parasites that consume the sap of another plant, epiphytic species do not harm their host. They satisfy their needs for water and nutrients through atmospheric condensation, and the rainwater running over the branches and trunk of the plant they are perched on. However, the host will not live forever.
une plante qui va supporter des épiphytes a une durée de vie limitée dans le temps. Et donc la stratégie de ces plantes, ça va être de coloniser rapidement une plante hôte, de se reproduire, de former une colonie et de pouvoir se disperser avant que la plante hôte ne meure.
These epiphytic species live attached to trunks and branches up to a height of several meters and have no contact with the forest floor.
C'est une espèce qui pousse dans des zones où les précipitations sont faibles, mais où l'humidité ambiante de l'air est relativement élevée, puisqu'on est en milieu tropical. Donc sans même de précipitation, cette espèce est capable de capter l'humidité de l'air grâce à ses racines aériennes, qui ont la particularité d'avoir des cellules spongieuses en quelque sorte, et capables de se gorger d'eau à la moindre humidité. Il y a aussi une particularité au niveau des feuilles, elles ont une cuticule qui est cireuse, c'est-à-dire il y a une couche de cire imperméable en fait, qui évite à la plante de trop transpirer.
Avoiding shade, these plants take to hostile open ground or high branches to stay in the light. To make sure they have an adequate water supply, they've been forced to elaborate different strategies to adapt to their host and trap runoff water. They've developed little aerial nests, reservoirs, and clinging roots to attach themselves to their support.
Donc le genre Bulbophyllum comprend 1500 espèces, c'est un des plus grands genres au sein de la famille des orchidées, et il a conquis quasiment tous les écosystèmes possibles et imaginables en milieu tropical, aussi bien dans les zones très sèches que dans des zones humides, comme ici en forêt de montagne. Donc la particularité de cette espèce, c'est une tige modifiée en bulbe, d'où le nom de Bulbophyllum. Et donc à l'intérieur de cette tige se concentrent l'eau et les éléments nutritifs dont a besoin l'espèce en période de disette, en quelque sorte, lorsque les saisons se font plus rudes, notamment durant la saison sèche.
Like the orchids, the plants on each level of this virgin forest use creative techniques and tricks to survive. Although the trade winds provide a naturally mild climate, nature at this latitude has to deal with frequent storms and tropical cyclones. Major climatic and microclimatic variations are apparent throughout the year. In addition, the steep terrain results in quite a pronounced dichotomy between the eastern, windward coast and the western, leeward coast. Driven by the trade winds, cloud formations over the Indian Ocean, which reach their ceiling at 1,600 to 1,900 meters, collide with the island's peaks, triggering heavy rainfall on the eastern side of the island below 1,900 meters. This makes Réunion Island one of the rainiest places in the world. In Silaos, for instance, more than 1,90 meters has fallen in 24 hours. 2.5 times London's rainfall for a whole year. It is certainly nature's excesses that have enabled such a variety of environments to develop. There are at least 100 microclimates according to aspect and elevation, and this facilitates the accommodation of new guests, since each one can find the climate that suits them. Few regions in the world offer so much climatic and biological diversity. All the world's ecosystems except for pack ice are present on this scrap of volcano. 30 natural environments flourish on the small island, from coral reef to coastal land, and savanna to cloud forest, providing homes for more than 2,000 species of native plant and animal. On Miracle Island, this land that rose from the depths of the earth, the incredible saga of life continues. Of course, reaching a hospitable location and surviving is just the first step. Species also have to adapt. Thierry Paillet and Claire Michonneau are intrigued. Angraecum orchids from Madagascar have a special long spur which led Charles Darwin to deduce the probable existence of a sphinx moth adapted to it. His conclusion turned out to be correct. But since Angraecum orchids reached Réunion Island, they have changed and their spur has shortened.
Chez les proches cousines de cette espèce, on a à Madagascar un éperon qui peut atteindre 25 à 30 cm de long, du nectar fond, qui sert à récompenser un papillon de nuit qui a une trompe suffisamment longue pour atteindre le fond de l'éperon. Ici, à La Réunion, il n'existe pas ce genre de papillon, donc la morphologie florale des espèces qu'on est en train d'étudier a dû forcément s'adapter à la faune pollinisatrice locale.
Thierry and Claire want to find out how the orchid can survive in the absence of its original pollinizer, the sphinx moth.
Ouais, c'est bon. Pas de problème.
This Angraecum striatum is different to its Madagascan parent. It has a shorter and especially a wider spur than its ancestor. In the course of evolution on the island, it has changed and been forced to find new partners.
The third visit.
Oh yes, it's fast.
Et il a encore des pollinies sur le bec.
On its beak.
Ouais, on les voit bien.
Yes, you can see them clearly.
Oui, il fait le tour en
In
fait
fact,
de la
it's
fleur.
going round the flower.
The Madagascan sphinx moth has been replaced by a small bird, Zosterops.
Magnifique. Ah, il les fait toutes, hein.
It's doing them all.
Super.
Great.
Impeccable. On a une adaptation très bonne entre une espèce qui est endémique et propre à l'île et un autre oiseau aussi propre à l'île qui est montré par cette association. On voit bien que l'oiseau peut s'alimenter au fond du tube nectarifère et au passage il prélève deux petits grains de pollen qui se situent ici et qui constituent les organes sexuels de la plante qui vont être dispersés sur d'autres fleurs en fait.
These two species have evolved, got together, and now survive in partnership.
Ce qu'il y a de très original, c'est que généralement les oiseaux pollinisent des fleurs rouges ou jaunes. Et là, pour la première fois, on observe la pollinisation d'orchidées à fleurs blanches. Donc ça permet d'élargir le spectre de couleurs de fleurs visitées par les oiseaux. Et ça, en termes scientifiques, ça représente en soi une originalité.
Guided by Charles Darwin's conclusions, Thierry and Claire decided to find the answers to their questions about the evolution of living organisms. By waiting patiently, they discovered a new adaptation in the heart of this virgin forest, an alliance, a phenomenon that can partly explain the diversity of the living world.
Ça, j'ai un sachet. Alors, où est-ce qu'ils sont les sacs?
Along these ramparts, often wreathed in mist, Mathieu Lecour continues his visit in search of petrels. Legend states that Grandmother Cal, the witch guardian of this giant, has her lair in its depths. She is said to have the power to warn off future perils. However, it is commonly accepted that if you meet her on the path at night, she can steal your soul.
Comme tous les pétrels et puffins, il crie la nuit. Et c'est un cri extrêmement lugubre qui pousse uniquement pendant les nuits sans lune. Et quand il remonte de la mer vers les lieux de reproduction, il va donc survoler des villages, etc., des îlettes, et il va pousser ce cri. Et donc les gens qui l'ont entendu pour la première fois ont imaginé cette légende de Grand-mère Cal.
Here, over time, in the middle of the ocean, an arid rock has turned into a new Eden. In the course of 3 million years of evolution, it has become a paradise, a refuge for those that live there. Gradually, over the millennia, life conquered this island born of fire and ocean. Its armies were immigrants, fugitives, vagabonds, and refugees. Their quest took many forms. Some were searching for warmth, others coolness. Some wanted shade and others light. Here, one needed humidity, there, another dryness. A single island, and it was the only one in the world likely to do so, sheltered and provided each of them with the land they needed, a land risen from the ocean. For those fond of high altitudes, it offered peaks to suit their lifestyle. For the insatiable, boundless resources. For the temperate, a biotop adapted to their needs. To conquer these new areas and survive, these settlers developed original strategies every day. Slowly, over millennia, they traveled thousands of kilometers on the winds or ocean waves. They evolved and changed, constantly adapting to their new environment. These vagabonds were plants, ferns, orchids, trees, animals, insects, and birds. And the island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that was ready to receive them was virgin territory. Today, this land, regularly covered by lava spewing from the bowels of the volcano, still shows us the birth and evolution of the world garden, as if in a fast motion film sequence. Here, nature resists, rebuilding herself constantly before our eyes. Mountain streams run down the slopes of the volcanoes where wild birds flirt. Virgin forests have grown over the millennia, their flora having reached the island on its own from Madagascar, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. The migration of birds, the action of the wind and ocean currents, and colonization by plant seeds has enabled highly unusual species to evolve, adapted to bare volcanic ground and regular cyclone seasons. The highly craggy morphology of the island provides at least 100 microclimates. All the plant species that have reached Miracle Island have evolved to form the only ecosystems of their kind in the world. Fueled by nature's incredible capacity for adaptation, exceptional environments have appeared and flourished on hostile basalt flows. Sadly, 350 years ago, the complex, fragile equilibrium that reigned on this island paradise was irretrievably upset by the arrival of a new species.